page?
That difficult for you.
Huh?
Sorry, I know I made that difficult for you. Like everyone. Yeah. Everyone except she.
Except her.
She's not taking.
Okay, so dental radiograph. So x-rays, everybody says, I'm going to have x-rays taken. I'm going to have an x-ray. Well, the x-ray is the actual energy, okay? The x-ray is the actual energy, it's not the real, what you're seeing. What you're seeing is called a radiograph, okay? So the radiograph is a representation of a three-dimensional object used in dentistry well, a dental radiograph used in dentistry to study and identify structures that are not visible to the naked eye. Okay, just like any other radiograph would be used. Radiography just means we're applying, basic science of physics and chemistry so that we can see stuff or use some photography so we can see images that obviously we cannot. So this is kind of what a radiograph would look like. Okay, you've got x-rays going through the tissues, hitting a plate or a sensor, and then you have, an x-ray or a radiograph where we can see, we look in the mouth, we could see that this patient has, what's that? No, it's a filling. What class? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
2.
2, correct. 2 surface interproximal between molars or premolars. Okay, we know it's got, what we look in there, we know he would have a metal filling, either gold or silver. We could see that he's got a crown. We probably wouldn't be able to tell that he has a root canal through the crown unless there's a hole through the crown. And we definitely wouldn't be able to see that he's got an abscess going, these shadows down here, he's got an infection, unless we took a radiograph. Okay, so again, it gives us a lot of information, and the patient may or may not be having any symptoms yet. I've got 4 root canals on my 4 front teeth from when I banged when I was little on the pool. I never had any symptoms, just had one of the teeth start to change color a little bit, and when I went to dental school, one of my classmates, one class ahead, ended up doing 4 root canals on my 4 lower front teeth. Again, I never had any pain, so the patient may or may not have pain, but the tooth is dead. Eventually, you start to lose bone, and that's how they noticed I had that, because when they took x-rays when I was in dental school, I had a big shadow underneath 2 of my teeth down here. So, kind of like this, it was just big. Okay. Okay, so what's the history? There's that guy. Okay. So William Conrad Röntgen, German physicist, discovered x-rays. Okay, so he discovered the x-rays. He was playing around with energy. He was shooting energy. It was hitting and bouncing off something, and he realized over at the end of the room something was glowing over there. And he'd shoot another shot of energy, it'd bounce off, and something would hit over there, and it would glow over there. Okay, so he started investigating, and that's how he knew found x-rays or discovered them. Otto Walkhoff made the first dental radiograph. Okay, so he made the first dental radiograph, not an x-ray. The other guy discovered the actual energy. This guy made the dental radiograph. He started experimenting on himself. Now, Edmund Kells was the first practitioner to take dental radiographs on a live patient. Okay, he repeatedly experimented on his hand, and eventually he lost his hand due to cancer. Okay, so again,
I was going to say, did any of these people get poisoned?
This guy, because he would take X-rays on his, on his finger or whatever, and he finally had to have his root or his hand amputated because he ended up with cancer. So repeated exposure, long-term exposure, and at that time probably it was a lot of energy. So nowadays the digital X-rays are very limited, and you can barely detect them, but you still are getting cumulative, and we'll talk about that. So he lost his arm. William Coolidge invented the first X-ray tube. So he first started to mess around in how to make things smaller and put them into a tube. Okay, so know those guys. Again, I think you just kind of kind of match those guys. Now, don't quote me though. I may say that it is and it's not. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go back and see that because I don't know why I said.
I didn't time that one. The second
I have to go
lecture I
back.
timed and like what time you said what. So because my tablet kept like
Yeah.
stopping and then I have to restart from the very beginning. So I started writing down the times every
Did I say
2
Fossa?
minutes, and you were said Fossa.
That's because you were rewinding it. That's why I kept repeating it.
No, I had to like start over. I had to fast forward it back to the right time where it like when it like kicks me off.
I
It's all
apologize.
there.
I apologize for that. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that.
My wife found out yesterday.
Okay, so X-rays again. X-rays is the actual energy, okay? It's the electromagnetic rays that are not detected by any of the senses. They travel at about 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed of light. Okay, so again, they are electromagnetic rays that are not detected by any of the senses. Wavelengths, the measurement of rays from crest of a wave to crest of another wave. This is another test question that people get confused, and I guarantee you somebody will get wrong. You can quote me on that because we just had somebody take the test the other day and on their final exam and they got it wrong. Again, crest of a wave to the crest of a wave. Okay, the crest, so here's a wavelength. If you drop a pebble in a pond, it's going to make ripples, okay? And that's a wave. Well, this same thing happens to waves of sound or light or anything, okay? And the crest is tip to tip, okay? Crest to crest. This is the wavelength. The longer the wavelength, okay, this is going to get this way. So from tip to tip, okay? That's the wavelength. The amplitude is the height, okay? So the height of the wave from the bottom to the top is the amplitude of the wave. Okay, so the wavelength is from crest to crest. I don't know how I can say it, amplitude, altitude maybe. Okay?
Yeah.
Amplitude and altitude. I haven't said that before, maybe that'll work this time. Amplitude, altitude is the height. Okay, so the wavelength is from crest to crest. The amplitude is the height. Okay, the altitude. Okay, maybe we'll get 100 on that one this time. Okay, then we have hard radiation. Okay, this type of radiation is produced by X-rays and gamma rays. They have short wavelengths and high penetrating power. Okay, hard radiation. This is the one that is in X-rays and gamma rays. Okay, so hard radiation is very rapid. Okay, so X-rays and gamma rays, again, you've got rapid. The alpha, these guys are more, in the environment, and some of these are medical radiation. Again, these will go through, and they'll get through this, absorbed in your skin, but they'll be stopped by aluminum. Okay, and X-rays will go through your skin, through aluminum, and they'll be stopped by lead, and that's why we use lead aprons when we take radiographs, because they stop that. And then neutrons, this is like an atomic explosion or atomic bomb. Okay, but hard radiation is what's in X-rays. Then you have soft radiation. Again, that's a longer wavelength. Longer wavelength is not as strong. So hard radiation is short and rapid firing. Soft radiation is long waves and not as strong. Okay, so less energy, less ability to penetrate. Some of the examples of soft radiation, again, you've got electric, radio, television, microwave, visible light, ultraviolet light. Okay, again, here's a radio wave. You can see it's really long, Microwave, it starts to get a little closer. Visible light. Again, when we get over here, you've got rapid, short wavelengths. Okay, so those are the stronger ones. So know the difference between strong radiation and soft radiation. Strong, obviously short and very powerful. The soft, long and less powerful. Okay, ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation is the radiation that when it's shot out of the X-ray tube, it goes through the tissue. If I've got a tooth, let's see. The tooth is made up of cells or tissue. If you've got an X-ray coming through here, you've got the primary beam of the X-ray. It hits tissue or skin or something, and it causes a change in here, okay? The cells have certain charge, positive or negative or whatever. You've got an X-ray going through it. When it hits it, it's going to cause a change to those cells. It's going to make them ions, either positive, they're going to lose electrons. We don't have to get into that, but lose electrons or gain electrons, that means it's ionizing the atoms, okay? So that's what ionizing radiation is, okay? So it's radiation that's actually causing a change in the ions of the tissue that it's hitting, okay? You don't really have to know too much other than this. The radiation that is produced when X-rays produce ions in their passage through matter, okay? So when the X-ray goes through the tissue, it produces ions, so it ionizes the tissue, okay? So that's what, there's ionizing radiation and non-ionizing radiation, okay? So non-ionizing wouldn't change the tissue, the charges in the atoms or in the ion, okay? They would stay the same. Okay, so penetrating power of X-rays depend on the following factors, okay? The wavelength, we talk about crest to crest, the wavelength. The shorter the wavelength, the greater the penetration or the stronger, okay? So the shorter the wavelength, the stronger the penetrating power of the X-ray, okay? So again, if we have an X-ray here, we have a tooth. If we've got a real short, a real powerful one, it's going to go through, until it hits lead, okay? If you've got a long one, it may not go through, okay? It may get to here, it won't go through. This guy's going to go through and hit the film, okay? So how the wavelength does matter, okay? The distance, if I have my beam really close, obviously it's going to be stronger. Okay, you're going to get more penetrating power because of the shorter distance. If I get way back here, and start to shoot X-rays, you're going to have less penetrating power. Okay, so again, how the wavelength is going to matter, the distance of the X-ray source. The other thing that matters is how thick this object is. If I have 90-year-old Miss Smith coming in, and I shoot yeah, it's going to go real through. If I get Mr. Smith, who's a football player, and he's 250 pounds.
How did she manage to get that?
I don't know. You never know. But again, the thickness of the density of the object being X-rayed is going to depend how much it penetrates through. Okay, so a football player, very dense. You're not going to get. You may have to give it more energy to go through.
So you will have to get closer.
You could get closer or increase the time, so you get more radiation through. Okay. Okay, so again, it's kind of the same thing. Radio waves, very long wavelengths. Television waves, it starts to get shorter, so they're stronger. Microwaves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolets, and X-rays, again, you can see how rapid they are. X-ray generation, X-rays are generated when matter is struck by electrons traveling at a high rate of speed. In order for this to happen, there must be a source of electrons, high voltage, acceleration, and a target. Okay, so this is where we get to the machine. So there's got to be power source to the wall. We got to have some sort of electrical current, and then we've got to have some machine that's going to convert that into the proper wavelength to give us those X-rays. This you have to know, okay, how to identify this, not only for our test, but I think it's on the Danby test as well, the X-ray test. You got to identify on the X-ray machine. Okay, so you have a control panel. You're going to set the time, set the intensity of the beam, set the kilovolts. Set the kilovolts and the milliamps so that you have the proper X-ray exposure. Okay, so you have a control panel, then you have an extension arm. The extension arm is this arm that goes here from the control panel or the control box, and all it has is just the wires and whatever's necessary to connect to the X-ray tube over here. Okay, so know the control panel, know the extension arm. The tube head, okay, is in here. The tube head contains the X-ray tube. And then you have transformers, and we'll talk about these others, seal and aluminum filters in here. Okay, the tube is responsible for generating X-rays contained within the tube head. Okay, that's what that one scientist who made the tube, the X-ray tube. Okay, the cathode, okay, is negatively charged electrode. Okay, so again, in order to produce the energy, you've got to go from negative to positive, or from positive to negative. Okay, it's got to go somewhere. So the cathode is the negative charged end of the electrode. Filament, and I'll show you a picture right now. The filament, source of the electron, within the X-ray tube, it is a coil of tungsten about 1 centimeter in length. Okay, so you have a cathode, which is negative, and you have a filament, which is a tungsten coil about 1 centimeter in length. And you have a focusing cup, which is going to focus all that energy to a target, which is negatively charged concave reflector cup of molybdenum. Okay, so again, those I think are all either matching or multiple choice. Focal spot, again, is the target where we're going. Okay, so here's a picture. Okay, so you've got the cathode over here, which is negative, and then you have this tungsten coil inside this cup. Okay, so you've got a focusing cup right here, you've got the tungsten coil in here. Okay, you've got energy coming through here, it heats up and it finally shoots to a focal spot over here, or a target. And it hits here, bounces off, and the X-rays are produced. Okay, so you've got a lot of energy coming out, hits there, and then it shoots out and produces the X-ray. The anode is the positively charged side. Okay, so that you've got going from negative to the other side, which is positive. And on that side, again, you've got a tungsten target. On one side, you had a tungsten filament. And then on the positive side, you've got a tungsten target, which converts kinetic energy into X-rays. Okay, so kinetic energy is just the measure of energy in motion, basically. Okay, so it converts that motion of the energy hitting that target and bouncing off and forming the X-rays. Only about 1% of the energy hits the target. Okay, so you've got, or actually it's made it hits the target that you're trying to expose, basically 1%. The other 99% just turn into heat. Okay, so if you shoot 100 X-ray beam or 100 X-ray rays to that target, only 1% is actually going to get made into an X-ray and actually hit the target that you're intended to hit. The other 99% just dissipate into heat. Okay, so only 1%, if you're shooting 1,000 here, okay, or 100, only one of them is going to bounce off. The others get absorbed in this green area here. It just kind of heats up. So that's why you need a lot of energy to get good X-rays. Okay, power supply. Your wall socket right there. Okay, 210 or whatever it requires, provides the power to heat the X-ray tube. Okay, the transformers really don't need to worry about too much, but inside the X-ray tube or X-ray head, we have step-down transformers, which are controlled by milliamps. This reduces the voltage going from AC current down to about 3 to 5 volts. So if we're going from 210, it breaks it down to 3 to 5 volts, which is needed inside the tube there. Then you have a step-up, which is the kilovolts, and that's after the 3 to 5. If you need to increase the number of X-rays that you're shooting, then you increase the kilovolts inside the X-ray, the tube head. Okay, so from the wall to the machine is the milliamps. In the machine itself is the kilovolts, and we'll talk about those later on. They're preset. You don't have to worry too much about them. They're either 60 or 80 kilovolts is what we have here. Okay, so they're just set. You have a timer. Okay, so here you're going to have a timer, and it's going to be set to whatever tenths of a second you're going to beat for. And again, that if you have an old or a more dense patient, you either going to increase the energy or you're going to increase the time to get a better image that you can read. It just depends on the patient. Okay, we have filters there to get rid of the waves that aren't going to do much, okay, just to minimize the patient's exposure. So those waves that are long and probably aren't going to do any good, why shoot them through? The filters, the aluminum filter is going to stop the waves that doesn't have enough power to actually do anything. So why expose the patient to those waves or that radiation? So it filters those out that we don't have any use for. Okay, so aluminum disc, you'll see it right at the opening of the tube head here. Okay, so that aluminum filter, if you remember that picture, that it had the hand and then aluminum over here. So if you put the aluminum here, before it hits the hand, it'll filter out all those bad waves. Okay, so here's the picture. Okay, so if we put this aluminum in front to stop the waves that we don't need, we're not going to expose the patient. Okay, a collimator basically increases the film quality and decreases the patient's exposure. Basically does the same thing. A collimator, think about it, if you've got x-rays going out to the side, the collimator basically focuses everything so that they go in straight lines, okay, so that they're not going out sideways and going all over the place. Okay, so it basically narrows out. If you've got a tube, and that's the collimator, you've got x-rays that are going, out this way and out this way, so that they don't go out and hit the patient up here in their eye or something. They hit this collimator, and it keeps them, kind of puts them all in a line so they go straight and hit your target. So basically filters also and just kind of focuses everything into one spot. Okay, so your collimator is, the tube, this lead collimator here kind of directs everything down the tunnel per se. Okay, so that everything goes through the tube. Okay, types of x-ray. This is sometimes gets a little confusing here if you're not already confused. This gets a little bit more confusing. Primary radiation is the primary beams. Okay, so if it comes out of the machine, if I've got the tube head right here, my primary this is my primary beam, as soon as it comes out of the head, okay? You've got the primary radiation, also known as a direct beam or primary beam. This radiation emerges from the X-ray tube. The penetration of this beam depends again on the kilovolts, which is what's inside the head, and the milliamps, which is what's coming out of the wall. Okay, remnant radiation, all of the radiation that reaches the X-ray film, passing through the object and producing a latent image that's not visible until you develop it. Okay, so if I have my tube, okay, so if I have a tube right here, and then I have my film over here. Okay, you've got your primary beam. It's going to hit the target, and then you're going to have, this would be your secondary radiation, which hits the film. Okay, so this would be secondary. This is primary. Secondary. Okay. Or well, I guess they call it remnant radiation. So what's left over, basically, remnant radiation, and then it produces a latent image. Latent meaning that you can't see it. It's kind of like in a dormant phase until you process it and you can see it. Then it's a live image. But again, we'll cover secondary right now. It'll show. There it is. So results when primary radiation and the atoms of the object contact and interact. Some of the primary beam will pass through without making contact, while some will irradiate atoms of the object. Okay. So basically, the secondary and remnant are basically same thing. Secondary and remnant, and secondary. Okay, so this part right here, after it goes through, and remnant. Okay, scattered radiation, again, it's kind of the same thing. Also known as secondary rays. They are rays from the primary beam that have been deflected by tissue or other objects. Okay, so anything that is going here, after it hits here, you've got scattered radiation just scattering all over the place. And that's the radiation that usually hits the patient, or that usually exposes the person taking the film. Okay, you don't want to get by scattered radiation. You're not going to get by the direct beam. You're going to get hit by the scattered radiation bouncing off the patient. Stray radiation, this radiation is what bounces inside the glass, inside the tube. Okay, so this is radiation other than the primary beam, which hits the glass. Again, you've got that X-ray tube. It's made up of glass. So you've got the primary beam. If you've got some radiation waves that are going off to the side, they bounce in there, and it's called stray radiation inside the tube. Okay, just remember stray and glass. Try to keep it apart. So stray radiation, it's inside the tube hitting the glass walls. Scatter radiation is not inside the tube, because the students will confuse this one with scattered, stray and scattered, because they're both doing something. So scatter radiation is the one outside that hits the patient and then scatters outside of the operatory. Stray radiation, it's actually inside the glass tube still. All right, let's take like a couple minute break here. Stretch out. Jumping jacks. Radiography. This is a long lecture.
I see.
doing, you don't?
It was really long so you could miss more. I guess the first one.
This is yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to look? I'll give you a thumbs up if you don't. Oh my gosh. Oh, my back's hurting. So much my back's not hurting. I know. Come on. You got it. What? You'll have a no. Ain't nobody got that. I got 100.
Again, there's four different grades on these.
No.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Can we retake these or no?
you can. I was gonna get into that as soon
Oh
as they
my
come.
god, because I needed to retake the second.
The second or first one?
The second test. Today, I need to redo my business. I need to stop putting so much information. I'm one of those people that's like, oh, for the primary radiation, and I'm like, that'll be the thing right there. I know it will. Instead of just putting what you understand.